Go. All right, everybody, it's the third Wednesday of every month. That means it's time for Kubernetes office hours, where we answer your user questions live on the air with our esteemed panel of experts. You can find us on #officehours on Slack. Follow the text below, and feel free to start asking your questions. Before we start, let's start with some introductions. Panel, introduce yourselves.
I'll go first, sure. I'm Chris. I work for the City of Ottawa. I'm the resident Kubernetes admin, team lead for our container strategy as well as DevOps strategy. Also a CKA, so if you have any questions about that process, I'm happy to answer.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Sika. I work for the University of Michigan. Primarily Kubernetes-wise, I do a lot with Dashboard and SIG UI. I do a little bit with SIG release, so like the release process, and also a little bit with batch jobs and trying to do HPC on Kubernetes. I'm kind of all over the place.
Hi, my name is Bob Killen. I work with Jeff. If you can't tell, we share the same office. Let's see. Yep. I am our sort of primary Kubernetes admin. We are completely deployed on-prem. Sort of my specialty is, well, on-prem and other things like Kubernetes Federation.
Hi, I'm Joel Speed. I work for Pusher. We're based in London, in Shoreditch. My primary stuff at the moment is building controllers. So I'm quite often in the Kube Builder channel, talking to people about how to build controllers and that kind of stuff. So CID questions and that kind of stuff I might be able to answer.
Hey folks, I'm Ilya from Vive, also based out of London, and I've worked on various areas of Kubernetes for a while, starting with kubeadmin back in the day, so networking stuff is also one of the areas where I know quite a few things, and the other thing of late is EKS Scroll. That's been my main project lately, so any questions about EKS, I'm happy to help. Also anything to do with GitOps and deployments and automation of deployments and CI/CD type stuff.
Awesome. And I'm George Castro, and I will be your host today. So first, let's go over some ground rules before we get started. First things first, this is a judgment-free zone, so there are no stupid questions. So just in the channel, feel free to ask. I know a lot of us have to start somewhere, so let's try to have like a positive environment about this. And as always, remember that the code of conduct is in effect. While we will do our best to answer your questions, the panel does not have access to your cluster. So like live debugging and all that kind of stuff is kind of off topic. But what we can do is, if you can give us the most amount of data that you can, we will do our best to at least get you going in the right direction or unblock something. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experiences and pro tips. And audience, you can help us out by pasting URLs to the official docs, blogs, links to GitHub issues, projects, and whatnot. What we do is put all the URLs in the sidebar here on the live stream so we can reference them. And at the end of the show, I'll grab all the URLs and kind of whack them into the summary so we have them available. So audience, do feel free to add as much information as you can. We always appreciate it. And if you're listening now, how do we sound? Please feel free to say hello and introduce yourself. We love to see where you're from. Salathiel is coming in from Cameroon. I think that's cool. So feel free to post and hang out in the chat. Even after the session, we kind of just like to have our own little space where we can hang out with people. We do have a discuss thread for this that Bob is going to post into Slack, where we are collecting questions as well. So if you see a question on Stack Overflow or you already have it and you just want to give us the link, that also helps us out as well, so you don't have to rewrite everything. And you can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, paying it forward, that kind of thing. So if you're getting some value out of this, we ask that you try to help someone as well. Each of these sessions are recorded and available on YouTube. When you go into the YouTube channel, that's youtube.com/c/Kubernetes community, all one word. You'll see all the playlists for all of our meetings, and we have these going back for, how long have we been doing this? Almost 2 years, it feels like. So we have 2 years worth of content for you to hang out and listen to if you want. If you want to sit in on this panel and spread your knowledge, you're more than welcome. All these people here are volunteers. We're always looking to get a diverse new group of people in here. So if you're interested in doing this and want to get on the little list where I bother you once a month to come hang out, it would be great. The only commitment is 1 hour a month. You don't have to come every month if you have. Usually we have enough panelists to cover things, but if you're interested and want to help us out, we would love to have you. And we're always looking for help to spread the word. And with the last bits, the panel, we do get support from some people. So I would like to mention now a shout out to Giant Swarm, StockX, Packet, Pusher.com, Red Hat, Samsung SDS, Weaveworks, VMware, Zing, Huawei, the University of Michigan, Lyft, Argo, Crow, and the city of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, for allowing their engineers to hop onto the show and help us out. So with that, everybody ready? Panel, are you ready? Audience, are you ready? Audience, feel free to just start putting your questions into the channel, and then we'll address your questions. We kind of have a little queue going. When we answer your question, what normally happens is that leads to more follow-up questions, so feel free to just keep on asking them. Just put like a big question, colon, or something that makes it easy for us to tell that you're asking a question and not just responding to someone. So with that, let's see, anybody else around? Ooh, looks like the questions are coming in, so we gotta start. Okay, who's ready for the first question? This is gonna be from Micah. Says, is there an easy way to make sure that each ingress object is handled by only one ingress controller? I tried to solve the issue by setting a default class using a hook. Does it make sense? And then they've got a URL here, which I will plop in chat. Anybody?
I think there's something on the discuss thread that was similar to this a week or two ago. I'll try to dig it up for you.
Okay. All right. We can come back to this one if you want to. Okay. So Chris is going to do a little research on that one, and we will come back to you. Next is MS Heine. I guess it goes, I realize this is more of a GKE specific question, but I've been trying to grant users bare minimum access via get credentials and then leave everything else through RBAC, but I get permission errors, specifically surrounding the fact that they don't have specific Google IAM permissions to do certain tasks when running kube control, which is really perplexing to me. If I grant a user a developer GKE role, they get access to all the namespaces, which I don't want. Is there any implication from removing unauthenticated users from system discovery cluster binding in GKE? Anyone have experience with this one?
Unfortunately, don't really use GKE, so not.
So that one might be a GKE question. Hopefully we can get Solly or someone in the afternoon session. So if we can't answer a question, I do make a note.
I can explore that a little bit. So
okay.
We're talking about, essentially, we're talking about any user who has access to Google Cloud, and they sort of ultimately have access to a Kubernetes cluster, except they're not admin, but they can look at things, right? I think that's what you get out of the box, right? So if you're like a GCP admin or whatever, you don't have an admin role binding in Kubernetes, but you do have access to Kubernetes. So you could go and actually create yourself an admin role binding if you wanted to. That's how I recall it works, and you could probably use RBAC to restrict access. It obviously isn't something that I could just sort of describe like this. It needs to be looked into more specifically. What is it you want to restrict access to, and what type of things you want to base that on, right? So whether you want to kind of like how do you want to express it, and what is it? So there are a few ways to go about it, because RBAC is a fairly complex API, so it's not something that I would be able to give you a prescriptive answer right away. So if you kind of be more specific, what is it you want to do, and what exactly is your concern here, whether you're not sure how to do it or you're not sure, like as you said, what are the implications? And if you think there could be any implications, what would you imagine those to be, right?
Chris, can you mute? Sorry to interrupt. Okay.
Yeah. Was it not muted?
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, so it's it'd be good to clarify a little bit what is it you need help with, because if you just need help with like figuring out how to do it, that's a long process. And yeah, I mean, perhaps you could clarify a little bit what is it you are concerned about more specifically.
Okay. And if you're still online, if you ask that question, please feel free to post a follow-up. The next one is a simple one, but I want to talk about it a little bit, from Sean Stout. It says, how do I migrate resources from one namespace to another? Can one of you cover kind of the answers that were given, and then a little bit of the mantra there, I guess. So the answers that I saw mostly involved with, exporting what you have into a new YAML file and then redeploying.
In general, you're not going to be migrating things between namespaces. You can dump all the configs and everything like that, dump all the objects, then put them in a new namespace. You'll want to, like when you dump them, they'll actually have the namespace explicitly in there, so you want to change that. You will have problems with certain things, like you won't be able to migrate like PVs, PVCs, anything that's sort of meant to be have more stateful workloads. But really, Kubernetes is sort of designed to just destroy something, recreate something. There's no big deal. You're not really migrating things. I think you can also like rename namespaces. Not 100% certain on that. Or wait, no, you can't rename namespaces.
No, you can't. No.
Yeah.
You asked me that, but yeah, you can't.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is to kind of drive home, especially those of you that are new to Kubernetes, that live migration of things is not a good pattern to get into your brain. Like once I started to learn that like destroying and recreating is the way to do it, I automatically found myself not getting in as much trouble as I did when I was trying to like treat things like a pet. So does anyone have more insight into this here?
Yeah, normally I just kill things and move them to a new namespace, update the YAML. So yeah, no migrating per se, just start fresh.
I see fierce nodding when you mentioned yeah, all of a sudden everyone started to nod.
I mean,
the Kubernetes says amen to that.
You come from orbit.
The whole principle, the whole idea around Kubernetes is everything is ephemeral. So realistically, you shouldn't be doing any sort of like vMotion type stuff. It should just be scrap it, recreate it.
All right, good. Moving on to the next question. Micus, Chris, have you found anything that you want to mention here?
Yeah, I found the link. It was had to do with Mongo ingress. Sorry, it was the Kong ingress controller. So having one controller per namespace kind of thing. So similar, but not quite what Micus was looking for. I was hoping maybe it'll provide a little bit of inspiration for him.
Let me repeat the question just to get everyone back in context. Is there an easy way to make sure that each ingress object is handled by only one ingress controller?
The ingress class is supposed to do that, but even then, it's not a strong guarantee.
Yeah, okay. And my looking at ingresses, they're not necessarily one-to-one, so one controller generally handles a bunch, but there might be a way to do that through annotations.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Most of that's all handled through annotations because you can give them different names and reference different ones.
But like if you use the Heptio contour, I think, is it still Heptio contour? It's VMware contour, or what is it called?
It's just contour now.
Contour. Yeah, if you use contour, you'd be looking to use the contour specific ingress spec, which is called ingress route, I believe, and that would let you, that would limit your situation to just contour. So because contour is the only one that implements ingress route. Inherently, it would limit you to that, so you can do that way.
Honestly, ingress is
arguably it's a more flexible thing that you can do. There are more things that you can do with ingress route that you can't do with other ingress controls.
To be kind of honest, like ingress is also kind of in a weird place. I think it's still V1 beta 2. I forget the API version on it. But there's so much actual configuration that has to happen, like through annotations or other things, or ingress route if you're adopting something that supports those CRDs. And I think a couple other of the ingress controllers are starting to adopt the ingress route. There isn't a lot of consistency around that at the moment. In fact, a lot of people will wind up just sort of deploying something and sort of managing it themselves instead of using like ingress controller directly.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? All right, moving on. If you're brand new to the live stream, welcome. You can join us on #office-hours on the Kubernetes Slack. Those instructions are below. And feel free to just start asking your questions, and we will get to as many of them as we can. The next one comes from Ed. Hi, Ed. Always good to see you. This is like an ironic one because he's asking, does anyone have any experience getting Kubernetes running on the new Jetson Nano? There's a report from Dieter Reuter that Docker runs fine. Wonder if anyone has added a Nano to their existing Kubernetes. So my initial answer to this question would be to ask Ed, because I know this is his jam, but he's the one asking the question. So I don't know. Has anyone played with these boards at all?
Nope.
Nope.
What is it? What is the question more specifically like?
So the Jetson Nano is a NVIDIA developer kit board, which is here, which looks very interesting. I just don't know if anyone has experience putting Kubernetes on this.
I mean, it shouldn't really matter, right? As long as you can get Linux running on it, the rest should be fairly trivial.
Yeah, and it's an ARM chip, and at this point, things are pretty solid there. So,
okay. Well, Ed has one shipping, and I'm going to volunteer him to let us know how it works out. Okay, moving on. Jeff has a question for Joel. Do you want to just read this one out?
I do, Joel. So you mentioned that you're doing kube builder stuff a lot. Have you run into an instance where, or how do you monitor an object that's outside of like your CRD's lifecycle? And I've run into this. I did it one way, and when I talked with Sally Ross, he told me a different way to do it, but said mine was just as valid, just not correct.
Okay, interesting. So as in like if you've got one resource and it kind of wants to have an owner relationship with another resource, but when you delete this one, you don't delete the other?
Yeah, so for the person that asked the HPC question, this might actually be interesting to them as well. I wrote an operator to support MPI jobs. What that means is you create an MPI object, it creates a job that is owned by the MPI object. But I wanted to monitor the pods that get spun up by that job and then act on certain events for those pods. The way I built it was I had a separate Go routine that I implemented above the controller logic in KubeBuilder. And then when I talked with Sally, he said you should be using some sort of index logic with KubeBuilder to actually like traverse down the ownership tree to find the pods and do that. Sorry, I'm dealing with a cold. So how would you do it?
I think probably the way you would have done it is the way I would have done it. Solly has got a lot more insight into this because he's actually building controller runtime. I think that is his day-to-day, right? But yeah, like
yes, it is.
I think that is definitely something that so I'm trying to think if we've got something similar that I've done.
I'll actually, just for everyone, link how I did it so you can also see it because, it's an interesting problem.
Like, does it
Can I have a
work?
look at yours and come back?
Does it work the way you did it?
Absolutely.
Well, surely there are many ways to do it, and if you think it's fairly legit, there's nothing to worry about.
The funny thing was
always like there's the framework way to do it, and then there's 12 other ways to do it.
The funny thing was when I was out there, someone actually was looking for Sally to ask this question specifically, and I was like, I don't know if this is the right way, but this is the way I did it. And it turns out that it's not incorrect, but there you go. So like diving into the weeds of Kube Controller, I'm literally just creating another Go routine when add is called that will watch for pods.
Yeah, I mean, we've got something sort of similar. We've got like a GitOps controller thing that basically does this. You have the Git repo, but then it creates an intermediary CRD that manages each individual resource. So then you do kind of want that intermediate, but the way we've got it is that the first controller watches the second controller's objects and reconciles when those happen. So the status sort of gets propagated up rather than actually that one watching the bottom one, if that makes sense. Not that like direct, but I can see why you would want that in that case.
Thank you for indulging me.
All right. Next question comes from Kubernetes. I hope I got that right. Thanks for joining our office hours. Is there anything on the roadmap anywhere for using static IPs?
And sort of what are you thinking of with static IP? Because like when you create a service, it should automatically get one from the service IP pool. As far as pods and other things, like those are meant to be ephemeral.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like he's typing, so let's give him a second. Kubernetes. Let's give him and both him and Micus are typing, so let's give them a chance to respond. I believe Micus, you had the ingress question, but hold on, I'm scrolling back to see if we answer that.
Yeah, he expanded it was coming from a Helm chart.
Okay.
And the problem is the Helm charts, you can't, like for a lot of them, you can't actually define what, in an annotation, what you want to use. And this sort of brings up some of the, well, both some problems with Helm charts and problems with the ingress controller.
So Micus goes on to add, actually, the charts are written by different teams in our company. One way would be having some kind of team policy requesting to follow rules, but it feels like the cluster should validate or better fix rules. Any comments on this?
And policy agent?
Yeah, something like OPA or meta
Let me get a link for that. Yep. So
that can sort of edit the resources as they're coming in. Although I haven't tried that with Helm. Do you know of any interaction there?
Not that I've seen. A lot of the newer Helm charts I'm seeing have annotations built into the chart to do that. But I mean, if you have a policy in place with OPA, it should be able to modify it as it comes in, or treat it as a templater and use something like Customize to add those annotations in there if they're from a common pool.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if Helm itself would see a problem with the object changing. Like if you're deploying through Tiller and all that.
Not that I've encountered, but a lot of people, one of the patterns I've seen is people just use it as a templater and then apply Customize after the fact, so they just get the YAML and go that way.
That's my preferred way of using it, personally.
Yeah, so it never hurt to try. I'd like to see how that handles it, but I think OPA would kind of take precedence over that.
Yeah, he says, I'm doing it with Helm, but that doesn't seem to be work with AWS ELB. But looks like people are still typing.
So maybe they may be thinking about the nodes, something like that.
Maybe.
Static IP.
Let's give them a chance to type here for a second. Let's see if we can do something else. Well, keep on typing, everyone, as we'll tease this out. Sometimes it might take us a whole episode to answer a question. Amitoj, I hope I get that right, says, hi. I work at a startup in NYC working as a software engineer, part-time helping out in DevOps. Is there any way to find out why a request is taking too long to respond in Kubernetes? When I am trying to fetch data from one pod, it processes requests in 2 seconds and sends a response, but the other pod receives response after 8 seconds. Network latency is taking a lot of time. Response size is around 35 megabytes. Both the pods are in the same region, but they're in a different service. Any idea what's going on here?
Sounds like it could be an application issue.
this is honestly where getting more like application level with tracing can be really helpful. So something like Jaeger and enabling like Zipkin or something like that to sort of give you a bit more introspection to all that stuff would be really useful.
Any of you have any experience in tracing? Like, what's the TLDR on adding that to your app? Like,
isn't like Istio the easiest way to add tracing to all your things?
Linkerd.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't feel like, hey, my response time is slow, and then it's like 3 hours later you're in Istio land. I mean, is there more lightweight? You know, he says he's working for a small startup.
Linkerd has. Oh, go for it, Bob.
Linkerd is definitely lighter weight than Istio. You can do other things like circuit breaking and fault injection and some of the other things there. It might not give you, that might be a good place to start. It might not give you everything you need to try and troubleshoot the problem. That might be a good first step before diving into like Jaeger and some of the other stuff where you're actually injecting more trace points into your application.
Then even without tracing, I mean, there's probably a way to troubleshoot it. It seems like maybe the question is kind of like, I mean, maybe in this case, the person isn't exactly they aren't exactly sure how to do things in Kubernetes, and they're not sure whether Kubernetes may be introducing something to the path that they're not exactly aware of. There are a few good tutorials on networking out there. I'd recommend watching some of the talks by my colleague Brian Borum or Tim Hawking on networking in general and understanding how services and pod IPs and all this stuff works, and then being able to have with that in mind, you'd probably be able to tell more clearly what is actually going on and whether Kubernetes may be doing something to your traffic versus you might have misconfigured something, or it's just an application level issue.
Even getting just Prometheus in there might be able to help kind of pinpoint some stuff.
And they do have Datadog, but I don't think Datadog does tracing itself. I haven't used it though.
I think they do some level. I had a presentation from them a few months back. I remember some level of tracing.
Yeah, I'm 6 months behind on their features. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I need to though. So hopefully, Amitoj, that will get you started, and feel free to post a follow-up, you know, if you have any more details there. Okay, so are we going back to Lauren's problem here? Says, let's see. So last time we checked, doesn't seem to work with AWS ELB. My Keys cluster is hosted on a private network. Only the ELB is in the public network. Kubernetes wants to send a link to a tool called Kale, which is Kubernetes tail. I have seen this before. So he recommends that would be a good thing for which
I think that was for troubleshooting.
Yeah, I think so. So thanks for that link. And then Lauren goes on to say, I received a request to have static inbound IP, but the ELB public IP may change. I'm trying to find a way to configure the Nginx ingress to create an AWS NLB with static IPs. And then he says we're using FluentD. Oh, that's more of the tracing stuff.
I would personally try not to bind to IPs explicitly. Instead, just go for DNS names. I
Hello. We're back.
Slowly but surely coming back.
Hey, Joe.
George, what'd you do?
Yeah, so this one says 40-minute meeting now as well.
Yeah. Okay. I apologize. Yeah, I think it's because I joined in, not signed in with the right account. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. Okay.
I'll forgive you.
Yeah. So thankfully that didn't take that long. Real quick, Bob. So you were saying he was asking for static IPs and you were recommending using DNS names instead. Okay. Can you give me the why? Like, convince me.
For a lot of things, you know, your IP, at least externally, might change.
Mhm.
But a DNS name should be essentially a static mapping to whatever it points to.
Mm-hmm. And there seems to be a pattern. Sorry, I'm trying to get more of the patterns out of everyone this time. That seems to be a pattern across Kubernetes, right? Seems like IP addresses are never meant to ever be, I don't know, end user exposed is kind of probably too strong, but strongly defaulting to dynamic DNS style things as opposed to an IP address.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not really Kubernetes, right? That's more generally good practices. Just with Kubernetes, you get DNS for free.
Yeah.
And that if you don't use it, I mean, you must have really good reasons to not use it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's see then.
He responded, "That's my stance, but my stack is hosting Artifactory, and for obscure reasons, a client needs to open firewall to access it from a private network. So that's firewall rules."
Yeah. This is static IPs for ingress, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a question of what does your underlying infrastructure support. It's not really a Kubernetes thing. It's something that you'd be looking for your infrastructure to support. So you could potentially configure AWS things in that way. You can, for example, use an NLB with a pre-allocated license ID and that type of thing, right? Yeah, but it's really the question. It's down to infrastructure. It's not really down to Kubernetes. Kubernetes may or may not support a particular thing in your infrastructure, but for common cloud providers such as AWS, for example, you could use NLBs there, and I think there's similar features in Google and other cloud providers.
And it looks like we have two more recommendations here. Max Guy says, on the IP question, can't you set the load balancer IP field in your kind:service? And Cooper Sally says, I would use a bastion in that setup.
Regarding setting the IP in the service type, not everything actually supports you essentially requesting a specific static IP. At least ahead of time. I know some of them you can, like, when you request it, it will have a static IP for the duration that service exists, though.
Yeah, I mean, the solution really depends on what you're looking to use as your infrastructure provider, right? Yeah, and then if given that, what are your constraints? And there are so many ways to work it out.
Okay, let's give people a chance to chew on that, and then we'll come back to it. Mart would like to ask, welcome, Mart. Jeff, you mentioned HPC and Kubernetes in your introduction. Is this similar to using, for example, Slurm as a workload manager? If so, can you share some references for us to look into?
So one of the passions that I do kind of as part of work, kind of as not part of work at the university is trying to enable research computing and HPC on Kubernetes. A lot of the primitives are there. It's the main thing that's lacking is the researcher user experience. So technically, if you want to spin up a Monte Carlo type simulation, which is literally spinning up thousands of parallel jobs that are all the same job, just with like a little tweak of a parameter, not like a whole completely different thing. You can do that on Kubernetes. But again, you don't have like in Slurm, you have like srun or sbatch. That's one of the things that we're trying to work on. There is also an effort, there is a repo called, it's like github.com/Kubernetes-sigs/kubebatch. That adds a lot of other primitives like co-scheduling, so having all the pods in a certain job spin up at the same time instead of just, scheduling them and forgetting them. Also in there is a PR for the MPI operator that I kind of wrote separately and linked earlier, but that should be in there soon. There's also the concept of queues. What I'm getting at is there's a lot of HPC style primitives in kubebatch that sit on top of the basic job primitives in Kubernetes. More effort is happening in this space. I can certainly rant longer, but I'm not going to. Ping me after if you want to talk about it and also collaborate. Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Bobby Tables?
Yes. So one of the couple of the fundamental things that Kubernetes is missing itself is the concept of queues and wall time. However, I know kubebatch, I believe, they are planning on adding queues. Wall time is not there. There is work coming out of the folks at Scilabs with Singularity. They are actually adding like Slurm jobs so that we can submit stuff to a Slurm workload manager, as well as sort of a hybrid deployment where you're sort of scheduling between both. I expect over like the next year and a half, we'll see a lot more sort of cross classic HPC workloads in Kubernetes.
Does this work happen in a certain SIG, or is there a working group for this?
So a lot of this effort is happening in SIG scheduling, which is kind of weird, but it kind of makes sense because the original effort of kubebatch was to make an HPC style scheduler that works with Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. But the problem is an HPC style scheduler that works in Kubernetes has a lot of baggage with it, like supporting specific types of jobs, supporting things like co-scheduling and all these different behaviors. It's not just a separate scheduler for Kubernetes. It probably could have lived under SIG Big Data, but that's can of worms I'm not going.
Yeah, I'm mostly just wondering if someone's interested in HCPC in Kubernetes, where would they end up?
There definitely are interest in it. It's more so of a user thing, and it has like a lot of bleed over with big data, machine learning. There isn't really a good, specific place for it, and honestly, like the community itself is sort of smaller than either of those communities, so it's not necessarily worth like having this dedicated thing for that when a lot of the work is also being handled by these other entities that might be in general better fit to like drive the general work effort for this stuff.
Cool. All right. Anything else? All right. Moving on. Dinesh, welcome. Would like to ask, I use Flannel for my pod network. My pods are properly running, but the container does not have internet. What could be the issue?
Few things. kubedns or whatever DNS entry could be. I've had that issue before where I just had to restart kubedns and everything went back or upgraded the version. Could also be just networking rules on your environment. The host config file could be messed up. So I think there was another thread undiscussed. I'll go find that someone had some similar issues with that.
Okay.
I would consider the question of whether you have access to the internet from your nodes, and whether the nodes have like direct access with public IPs or somehow NATed or something else is going on. Whatever you use there, figure that out. And if it's something that is not particularly straightforward and could be improved, then try and make those improvements. And if it's done in a certain way by design, that's fine. You just need to find a way to work with that. And, it could be based, like, I mean, let's say if you're using like Vagrant or something, that stuff could get really tricky. Just take a look and review what is it you have and why is it in that way. And if you don't really know what is going on there, then obviously you have a slightly bigger problem there. The other thing is, Flannel isn't like ultimately the most. It's not really the best option in my opinion, really. But again, I'm biased, of course. But Flannel is quite. It can be quite tricky, and it doesn't really give you all the information, and I don't think it's very well supported either.
Yeah, so I just dropped a couple links in to the Slack there. One of them is the official guide for debugging DNS resolution. So I would start there and try to kind of work your way back.
Any other recommendations? All right. This next question I think is really interesting. Maurizio, I hope I got that right, asks, can you give a pod exclusive rights to a NIC and a CPU?
Big TLDR answer is no.
Why, Bob?
You can, well, your containers are going to share, access with the host, and the host will be able to use everything. If you had multiple NICs and you bound the system, or you deployed the container with host networking and then specifically bind it to use that NIC, you can sort of work around it that way. And you can pin workloads to specific cores and specific CPUs, but there isn't really a way to guarantee exclusivity in that. You would sort of have to manage that yourself, or try and manage that with resource constraints to say go here and consume, allocate this, which should inform Kubernetes itself that other workloads should not be scheduled using those resources. But there's no sort of simple way of guaranteeing that. There is some work being done on adding what's it called? Oh man, I'm totally blanking out on being able to carve up a adapter into multiple smaller adapters, and that adapter is then sort of given over to your container.
Bonding.
No, it wasn't bonding. It was creating a virtual network off something else.
NFV.
I think so. SRIOV. There we go. And being able to give a explicit SRIOV device to a pod. But as far as I know, that's not really ready to be used yet in any real production way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I would.
The question is really why is this needed, and what does a particular use case do with this? Mm-hmm. Because there may be a better answer to this problem.
Yeah. This question's come up a decent amount with telcos, and people are doing more heavy research type workloads, mm-hmm. where they want to pin or dedicate an entire CPU to an explicit task. It also comes up with when you're mapping through to GPUs and other host adapters that are on an explicit PCI Express lane.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that also the kind of, isn't it kind of leading towards using VMs instead of containers for pod isolation? Because then if you're like a VM, then you kind of have a representation of what it does seem like an actual NIC, or you could potentially map that to a physical NIC.
You do get the penalty of virtualization on top of that. Again, at least in research heavy workloads where you want that CPU banging away as much as possible to complete something.
Yeah, I'm just wondering in a cluster, am I better off manually partitioning all these things, or letting Kubernetes do its thing? I don't know. I would be interested in the use case as well.
Yeah.
So, all right. Salathiel asks, I'm new to Kubernetes, about a week. Welcome. Yay. I get started. I built a Slack bot with a command /kubectl. that should run on my dev host. It was kind of challenging to get permissions working from a Docker container. I got help from here and there to define roles, and it worked like a charm. Bouquet emoji. But when a friend tested it on his cluster, he had to modify many things, the image name, and other stuff. He suggested me some improvements and changes, and I had my work on it again. But his environment differs from mine in many regards. I want to mount host path during dev on my side only. I've been reading the Helm helps set different environments per, wait, is that environment variables per environment, I guess? But could help me at this. Notes, I need host path mounting, but not my friend testing it. I would be happy to have the host path relative to the project root path. Could Helm help me at both?
I mean, it could, because you could have that toggle within the values chart too. If there's a host path isn't there, then use the relative path. So it adds a little bit of logic in the back end.
Yeah, the other thing you could do is, if you have a EV or whatever that you're going to be looking for, no matter what, that could mount to whatever, and then you just have a sort of statically defined PVC. So that sort of separates out, the host mapping or whatever you're having to do to the static resource to the dynamic thing of the persistent volume claim.
Okay. Any other comments on this? I see people typing. We'll give it a sec. We are down to our last 15 minutes. So that is my reminder, Jeff, to get the raffle started. Those of you that are new here, the way it works is if we read your question live on the air, we will automatically enter you in a chance to wear a Kubernetes t-shirt. And then we all fail to wear that shirt on the day to show you what it looks like, but they're pretty snazzy. And then I'll ping you afterwards and you can do that. It's just a shirt with the Kubernetes logo on it. It's very handy. So we do encourage you to drop by and ask questions. So Sathius says, okay, thanks guys. I did it that way. Thanks again. Okay, moving on to Micah's question. On EKS, is there an easy way to make sure all exposed ingress services are protected by a client certificate by default? It looks like there is no ELB which supports client certificates. Looks like I should use an NLB, terminate TLS on an Nginx ingress controller, and annotate each ingress object properly. It would be cool if there would be no need for chart developers to bother with TLS stuff and simply let the cluster do the right thing. Traffic, for example, nicely abstracts less encrypt away from the ingress objects, but has no good client certificate support. What do we think about this? So Laurent seems to add, says, I'm using Cert Manager to do it. Panel?
Certainly, Cert Manager is a good option to solve part of that problem.
Okay.
I would recommend, looking at other options than Nginx, unless you're particularly comfortable about the idea of using Nginx. Otherwise, it's probably a better idea to use something like Contour or whichever ingress control that is based on Envoy that is much more friendly with Kubernetes. The Nginx integration with Kubernetes is fairly ad hoc, and you'll often end up debugging things and digging into things that are not very straightforward. And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of magic being done with annotations that you really don't want to get into if you're looking to get started on this, unless you've already invested in Nginx ingress controller or generally in Nginx itself.
Yeah, if you can read an Nginx config file and you're confident with it, fine, Nginx ingress controller. Otherwise, there are better solutions.
Okay. I mean, it's not like you have to. I mean, you may be able to read the config file, but you also need to understand how the hell the logic maps some annotations that you read about and some documentation that may be not up to date to some kind of things happening in the Nginx config. There's so many things that can go wrong there. So yeah, be cautious of that. And if you can use a different control or ingress controller, such as something like Contour or Glue or something of that sort, then it's probably a better idea.
All right, we are down to probably our last two questions. David says, hey, all, I'm pretty sure the folks at Heptio were working on a dashboard for managing multiple clusters before when they were acquired. Has anyone heard anything about it? Are there any interesting projects to look around at providing a UI to manage multiple clusters? Can we answer the second half on the first part? I can't really answer at this point other than stay tuned.
I can speak to Rancher.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. What other cool dashboards thing? Because I know Jeffrey's also a co-chair of SIG-UI. So Chris, you go first.
Yeah, so we use Rancher internally here to manage our clusters. It's quite nice how you have a single pane for your on-prem clusters, either created through the Rancher UI or through the RKE tool. You can also import Kubernetes clusters that were created however you want. It also has hooks into the major cloud providers too. So if we just, hey, I want to create a GKE cluster, it goes and creates it, manages it for you, injects. It gives you a lot of nice feedback. And their most recent version, they have Prometheus embedded on everything. So you get metrics right out of the box, which is really cool. So it depends on how you want to, you abstract a lot of things away. So depending on how much control you want to have over it, it can change things, but it works great for us. So. And the other one, Google's Anthos, I think was the new one on the field.
Yep, that's another one that's like also very tailored specifically to the thing. You'll find that like the dashboards themselves tend to be very much the large value add that the different vendors and different groups give. So it's kind of hard to find a good multi-cluster open source one. And I will be quiet now before Jeff cuts me off.
No, it's okay. So supporting multi-cluster is on the roadmap for the current Kubernetes dashboard project. We're trying to finish our migration, which is hopefully going to be done before KubeCon EU. And then the next steps are getting better OS support, and then we're going to look into ways to both support viewing multiple clusters in the dashboard as well as potentially spinning up different clusters using dashboard. So that's future state. We aren't paid to work on this. We have like 1 day a week to work on it. So roadmap, hopefully soon.
Yep, and it looks like Bjorn is +1ing Rancher as well.
Contributions welcome to dashboard.
Yeah. Are there any other dashboardy things that people are looking at or playing with?
Yeah, those are the only ones I've seen. Everything else is like single pane, single cluster. So,
yeah. Okay, and I hope that answers your question.
And just one quick thing. In general, I would actually avoid using a UI as much as possible, at least for trying to do work. It's great for visualizing work. But anything you actually should be doing, like I would always default to a CLI in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's precisely how we're using Rancher. It does our admin stuff, but most of the interaction is through command line. So, and it's upstream Kubernetes, so they're not modifying it in any way, which is also nice.
I like dashboards as like read only on the monitors and stuff, but then actual work on the thing.
Exactly.
Yep. And Lawrence has agreed. Everything is code. So we are wrapping it up. I think now would be a great time to do the raffle. While we are doing this, Jeff is writing this into his custom 20-sided dice randomizer. And just a quick shout out to Google, who sponsors the t-shirt giveaway. And the winner is Jeffrey.
Sorry, I was pinged, and I am just now doing it. 111.
Busily reading his
Mart.
own. Mart. All right, you have won a Kubernetes t-shirt. I will PM you afterwards and give you a code to the CNCF store. So if you go to stores.cncf.io anyway, there's a bunch of t-shirts for all your favorite CNCF projects. So you can get Kubernetes stuff. I got a Prometheus one. So that's always good stuff if you want some swag. So with that, we maybe have time for one more quick question. Does anybody in the channel have one? quick roundup who's going to KubeCon, because is this the last one before KubeCon?
I believe it is.
When is KubeCon? KubeCon is end of May, right?
Third week of May.
1, 2, 3.
21st, 24th.
It's like a month from now.
Okay, so we'll have an office hours the week before KubeCon, it looks like, right?
1 sec.
Yeah.
Oh, we will. It'll be May 15th.
Well, we'll be traveling.
We won't
Yes.
be. Our flight, sorry, we will not be traveling. We fly out that evening.
Okay, so we may or may not have a session. We will decide later on today or something. Real quick, though, tell everybody what your KubeCon plans are if you have any. You can always run into us, at least to me, at KubeCon and things like that. And if you're an office hours participant, I always have cool stuff to give you. So drop by for me. How about y'all?
Watching the videos when they come out.
We'll find a way to get you to San Diego.
Yeah, that's in the plan for this year. So
Awesome. Ilya, you planning on being there? Yeah.
I think I'm going. Yeah.
Yep.
Some of you there.
Yeah, and Bob and Jeff will be there after taking their cool little tour of CERN's hyper collider thinger. All right, that's good to know. And Joel?
Yeah, I've actually got a lightning talk on the Monday night, so
Ooh,
come see that.
Nice.
Good to know. All right, and with that, let's wrap it up. Mark, hang out for a bit, and I will PM you the shirt. Really like to thank everyone for joining us. We do this the third Wednesday of every month. So if you've had a positive experience, please let us know. We're always looking to improve, and please tell a friend. And with that, sorry about the tech hiccup earlier, but thank you, everybody, and we will see everybody in how many hours? 6 hours. We're doing the West Coast edition, and we will do this again with another set of panelists. So thank you, everybody, and have a good month.